Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mystery Theory podcast. Today I'm going to be trying something different where I will be recording a video from this podcast and uploading it to my YouTube channel. Now this is a try kind of thing, so I'm trying to see if the audio is good, if I continue to do it this way, and that way I can kind of do both things. Kind of have a format where I can sit down and talk to you about these cases, and also have my podcast for those of you who do want to download them or listen to them while you're going to work or running errands or doing something at home. Let me know if you're watching this on YouTube, if this is a format that you would like to see here, or if this is just extra work that I'm putting on myself and I should keep just the podcast the way it is. Now, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about who could have killed the Black Dahlia. I was going to do the introduction thing where I was going to talk about the Black Dahlia case from the beginning, but honestly, I know that most people that follow my podcast are already into true crime cases, and they probably do know about the Black Dahlia, which is one of those unsolved mysteries that has been talked about a lot. There's movies about it, was a feature in American Horror Story about her, and it's just one of those cases that every single time I listen to a podcast or I watch a video or a documentary, I always end up having more questions than answers, and I can never say, okay, this guy did it or this person did it. So in this video, my idea, or in this episode, my idea is to share with you some research that a lawyer in the UK did, and she's been obsessing over this case, and she went through every single document, court document, testimony, I mean everything that she could find, so she could come up with a suspect, which in my opinion it is very likely that he did it. So we have a name, we have a suspect, and we have how or the house he could have done it. So I'm going to be referring to my notes right here because I did a lot of research in different articles, and I feel like if I don't go through my notes, I will be skipping stuff that is really important for you to know. So as you probably know, the Black Dahlia's real name is Elizabeth Short. She was a young girl who had a lot of dreams, and one of them was to become a movie star. So she decided to move to Hollywood. Now, this wasn't something that was very unusual at the time. She was one of them. There was a lot of girls in the 40s that decided to move to Hollywood to try to find their, I don't know, success. They wanted to be movie stars, and they wanted to be discovered by somebody in Hollywood. So it wasn't like she did something completely different compared to the rest of the girls either. So it was pretty popular back then, or maybe it was a trend among younger girls who want to become a star or try to be discovered by somebody to go to Hollywood, and that is where she finally ended up dead. Now, one of the ironies of this case is that she wanted to be very, very famous, and she wanted to be successful, and she wanted people to know about her, but people actually got to know her after she was dead, and which is very, very sad. She was not only killed, but it was in a very horrific way. She was only 22 years old when her naked body was found in an empty lot on January 15, 1947. She was scrubbed, cut in half, and drained her blood. Not only that, but she was also mutilated on a Joker smile that was carved in her face. If you know about her case, then you probably knew all those details, but if you didn't, I mean, it's one of those things that you're like, how can somebody do all that and get away with it? He must have done something that will tell the police who this guy was. Now, again, this was something that was featured briefly on American Horror Story in the first season. I do love that season. Other seasons I can't really get to them. Some of them are a little bit too weird for me. Some of them have too much adult content that I don't think has anything to do with the story. So The number one, I do really like it. I feel like it was a really good story, and it was featured this as well. So it was one of those things that it remains an unsolved mystery, but it's been used over and over again. Today we're going to follow this British lawyer that was again obsessed with this unsolved mystery. Now, she wrote a book that is called Black Dahlia, Red Rose. In it, she shares her number one suspect and how she made sense out of this theory. Now, this book is based in facts, in documents from the case, letters, and grand jury testimony. She also contacted some of the last living people with knowledge of the events at the time. So all of this together creates this big theory that in my mind makes a lot of sense, and I just wanted to share it with you guys. Now, let's start from the end. She believes that Elizabeth Short was killed by an ex-boyfriend who happened to be a mortician's assistant. Well, former, because he wasn't doing that anymore, at least at the time of her death. She even confirmed that her theory was right with the son of a now deceased LA policeman who was involved in the investigation, and she clearly stated this in an interview. Now, so her theory is not only her theory, but it was also backed up by the son of a police officer. Now you're probably wondering, who is this guy? Well, his name is Leslie Dillon, and Elizabeth met this guy through her landlord, Mark Hansen. Now, Mark Hansen was not only her landlord, he was a very powerful man. He had nightclubs, he had a movie theater, and he also had properties that he would rent to some of these young girls looking for fame in Hollywood. Now, he would also give these girls a place to stay in exchange for favors. He happened to be obsessed with Elizabeth, and I'm talking about the guy Mark, who is the landlord, and who is the guy that kind of introduced this other suspect, or this suspect that we have in this case. Now, Elizabeth, I mean, he was an older guy, but she was lured to him by his wealth and his success. He was a millionaire, and at the time separated from his wife, but he had 2 daughters that lived with her in their home in Hollywood Hills. So he kept his apartment and have little parties with his looking for fame kind of girls that would stay there. He would promise to help to become famous, but he would never deliver. Most of the time they would end up as dancers in his nightclubs, or you know, he would just kick them out because they weren't useful anymore. Elizabeth was one of the lucky ones because she would live with him in that apartment. However, it wasn't like they had any kind of relationship as far as boyfriend-girlfriend kind of thing. So Elizabeth would have boyfriends, and Mark didn't like that idea. So he slowly became more and more possessive over her. Elizabeth, however, was pretty sneaky. So she would ask the boys to drop her off a block away so she wasn't seen with them. Elizabeth was also asking him for money at the same time. So she would live with him and have boyfriends, but then would ask him for money. Remember, she wasn't working at the time and depended on the guy for food, for a place to sleep at night. And according to one of Elizabeth's friends' testimony, this is in the court document, Mark was tired of putting up with her and her boyfriend's money demands. The LA Times reported at the time that she wasn't only broke, but her teeth at the time of her death were so decayed that they were plugged in with wax. I mean, she wasn't living a glamorous life. She was living in this guy's place. She didn't have enough money. She would have to depend on him to get money. And at the same time, I mean, she was trying to live her life and have boyfriends and stuff like that. Now, back to Leslie Dillon. He worked for Mark Hansen, which was the landlord and the guy that we've been talking about. And before that, he was a mortician assistant. Okay, he worked as that before working for Mark. The same theory that Idwell, which is the lawyer that has this theory, was explored previously by the police. So this was explored specifically by the chief police psychiatrist, Dr. J. the River, but apparently was covered up at the time. She even mentioned that as she was going through the documents and papers on the case, a lot was missing. And almost always the documents missing had some kind of a connection to Leslie Dillon or Mark Hansen. So the theory that Idwell has right now, it's not something new. It's not something that wasn't talked about back then, but it almost something that was covered up. It was a theory that was there, that there is proof that was there, but not, not explored publicly enough to try to cover up. Now, if we go back, you can probably remember that her shoes and purse were found dumped in the trash after the murder and were found by a cafe owner. The cafe was 2 blocks away from Leslie's house, the guy that we think did it. The area where Elizabeth was dumped was the area that Leslie would take a shortcut to go to work. Now, later on, they discovered that he kept newspaper clippings about violence against women. He was an aspiring writer, but Idwell, the lawyer that did this research, read a few samples of his writing, and you could see his insecurities shining through the writing, and that and other things made her believe that he had an inferiority complex and a physical hatred for women. Now, let's go back to Mark Hansen, because he had connections with the police, specifically with one that was the lead homicide officer in this investigation. Even in the court documents, you can tell that the grand jury wasn't fond of the guy, and they just didn't believe him. But Leslie Dillon was at the time the #1 suspect according to the FBI records. He even offered the River, which was the psychiatrist who had this theory, a little bit of help with a book on sadism based on the Black Dahlia case. He also knew details about the case that the police never revealed, but he denies killing her or even knowing her. And according to Elizabeth's friends, 2 of them, not just 1, but 2 of them, she did know him and they did casually date. So they were not boyfriend and girlfriend, but they knew each other, and it's kind of weird that the guy is saying that he never met her. Now, the police held him for a while, but had no way to charge him with anything because they had no proof, so they had to let him go because of the lack of evidence. He lived a quiet life and died in 1988 when he was 67 years old. And up until the day he died, he was suspect #1 of the police. So the case of the Black Dahlia was really very well known only because of her gruesome death and how nobody can find whoever did it. But truth be told, at the time, there were a lot of girls that were homeless, that were killed, and just disappear overall because of the, I don't know, the environment that they were on in Hollywood. I don't know about today, but back then, if you mess with one of the very influential people there, nobody would hire you for anything. So I feel like getting involved with this kind of a mafia Hollywood scene back then wasn't the best idea for, Elizabeth. I do know that Elizabeth was one of those girls that didn't like to work, so maybe she kind of got closer to this guy for the benefits of having a place where to sleep and having somebody who would give her money. And I'm not saying it's her fault that this happened to her, but I'm just saying that sometimes the environment that these girls were getting into, it wasn't a safe environment. And there was a lot of cover-up at the time as well because of how influential these people were. I mean, these people had a lot of things that they managed. Like this guy had the theater, he had the nightclubs, and he had properties. He was a very well-known man and he had a lot of connections. So even though he might have not done it, you know, because we don't think that Mark did it, the guy who was renting or who was giving a place for Elizabeth to stay, you know, maybe something happened in between them that made him talk to Leslie and have her killed. It's just one of those things that it's not a very popular theory, and I think that's why a lot of people don't talk about it, because the idea would be that it'd be like a grand discovery of a gruesome or crazy kind of guy who did this. And honestly, if this is the guy, he lived his life in a pretty quiet way after that. So if he was in fact the one who killed her, he wasn't a serial killer. He wasn't somebody who was killing people all the time. He was just a guy who was very twisted, and when he was asked to do something, he took it to the next level. So maybe this is not the end of a very well-known story that people is looking for, but this is a theory, and this is something possible. Sometimes I feel like media makes things so much bigger of what they are, because this is a sad case of a girl who was killed in a horrific way. But now, when you think of the Black Dahlia, you can see her face, you can see the picture. I mean, it kind of became something like a franchise or something for people to exploit after she died. So I feel like people don't really want to know what happened to her, because it's one of those things that it's been like that forever, and having an ending like this, it really wouldn't make sense for a lot of people. So anyways, thank you so much for being with me today. I hope that I shed some light into this case, that it's been a very, very dark unsolved mystery, and hopefully I give you an idea, so every time that you watch a new video on the Black Dahlia, maybe you can pay attention to those details and kind of put them together and see if this theory makes a little bit more sense to you now than before. So I will see you guys back next Wednesday. I will have a blog post on this, and it will be in the description box down below if you're watching this on YouTube. If not, you can visit the mysterytheory.blogspot.com, and you can find the blog there, and you can leave comments and kind of let me know what your thoughts are in this, or if you have a different theory of who did this. So I'll see you next time.